The Simmons Titan 75 looks like another budget-friendly E-kit. With a dual-zone snare on its own stand, multi-zone cymbals, and samples that punch way above their weight, this might just reset expectations for what a kit at this level can deliver. This electronic drum set has no business sounding this good for the price, and in this video, I'll show you exactly why. So just a few weeks ago, I got my hands on the Simmons Titan 75 ahead of its release. The kit arrived in one big box. It was heavy enough that I had to slide it down my stairs before I could open it up. Inside, everything is nicely packed, secure, and thankfully the rack was partially pre-assembled, something that we saw on the Titan 50 BEX, if I'm not mistaken. Setting up rack pieces is hella annoying, so I really do appreciate when companies take the extra step for us. Putting it together was straightforward. If you've ever set up an E-kit before, it's familiar territory. I had the kit ready to play in about 30 minutes, minus the time that it takes to kind of organize the cables. They give you these little clips that help you run the snake kind of behind the rack so that it's not visual out front. It looks awesome when you have it set up, but you can really be meticulous and spend a ton of time making sure all the cables are perfect. So that's probably gonna extend the time per setup on this drum set. With everything assembled, the next big question, how does it actually sound? Inside the Titan 75, there are 314 full-length samples that were recorded in a professional studio. So you're not just hearing what I like to call 90s MIDI drums. You're hearing the ring, you're hearing the resonance, and pretty much like the way the room reacts to the drum, you know, as it was recorded. It really does change everything when you're sitting behind an electronic drum set because every note you play has space and character and it doesn't feel artificial. The sounds of the Titan 75 have a lot of depth and they're really open and you can hear the room sound in these recordings, something I'm always critical of on drum modules. I love when the built-in samples on the module itself just sound good right away. Like I don't wanna have to deal with importing sounds or connecting to a computer to use VST libraries. I wanna just power it on and play. If you've ever played on cheaper electronic drums, you probably noticed how a lot of the snare drum sounds or the tom sounds, they kind of just stop dead as soon as you hit them, and they're almost like cut off early, and what I think is to save memory, and a lot of them just feel really flat and cheap sounding. It's not really fun to play, it's pretty uninspiring, especially when you compare it to these massive sounding drums you hear on modern recordings. I feel like the Titan 75 really avoided this trap, and you know, my positive notes on the Titan 50 BEX are similar in this regard because I can hear a lot of that drum kit in the 75. So I have positive notes all around about the sounds that are included in this module. Some of my favorite presets, we've got the rock and alternative ones. Those are, I mean, that's kind of what I gravitate towards, but they got deep snares, they got real washy cymbals, and just big toms. Switching kits on the module is nearly instant. The module itself doesn't have bells and whistles. Like, this thing is fairly simple and straightforward, but that's totally cool because I just want the thing to work, right? I don't need to have a bunch of complex menus. I just want the sounds to be good. It's easy to use. You get 50 presets, you got 20 user kits. These sounds punch way above their weight. Now, better sound might not be the first thing people think of when shopping for a kit under $1,000, but that's what keeps me coming back. Out of all the kits that I've reviewed, under $1,000, I don't know if anybody has topped Simmons quite yet. But that's just sound, right? That's not the only factor we need to talk about here. The way that the drums are placed, how the pads respond, that stuff matters just as much. So why would moving the snare to its own stand be such a big deal? On paper, it sounds minor, but for anybody who's played on a budget E-kit, one with the snare that's like mounted to the rack, you'll know exactly why this matters. Most of those kits, they come with a snare locked to the main rack, and it kind of like sits in a fixed position. You don't really get much say where it goes outside of sliding it on the rack bar, and the height adjustment can be kind of annoying, and then also it tends to sag unless you really crank on the plastic clips or whatever kind of mechanism they have for holding the drum up. The core problem with rack-mounted snares is that there's really limited flexibility. They really stay rigid and force you to adapt, which is kind of the opposite of how the real kit feels. I just hate how hard they are to move. Sometimes I want to position just the toms and the kick and the hi-hat like forward a little bit. In order to do that with a rack-mounted snare, you really gotta loosen up like 4 different connection points and then pull on the snare and move it, and just there's a lot to it. And the more that companies release budget kits that come with a snare stand, I think the better. They're including it with this kit, so that is a positive. Now, it's not only just about where the snare drum goes though. The Titan 75 pad includes rim-mounted sensors that spread the triggering evenly across the surface. Most budget E-kit snares have what are called hotspots, where you'll have one part of the head that's gonna trigger way louder and it's gonna be way more sensitive than the whole rest of the surface. That inconsistency is really annoying, especially if you're trying to play rolls or ghost notes. So the Titan 75 really has a balanced feel on the snare drum, and really every stroke comes through the way that you want it. And while the snare is really cool, the cymbals on this kit bring just as much realism to the table. Cymbals are probably one of the toughest parts of the electronic drum set to get right, and they often end up being the weakest link, especially the hi-hat. On many entry-level sets, you only get single zone cymbals that trigger one sound. Or in some cases, the max velocity at 127 will trigger a different sound. Usually it's like a bell for the ride. Now that works for keeping time, but it doesn't actually respond to what we play. Without distinct zones or realistic transitions, the experience feels really limited and takes away a lot of the expressiveness you'd expect from real cymbals. On the Titan 75, we have a 12-inch multi-zone ride with bow, edge, and bell zones, along with 2 crashes that both have the choke ability. And it really does flow nicely between the 3 zones. Beyond zones and chokes, because that is important, but the real thing that seals the deal is the cymbal samples themselves. They're really open, they're musical, they're washy. They sound like cymbals that I would actually play. The hi-hat deserves a quick shout out too. The Titan 75 has a continuous hi-hat pedal that tracks every position between open and closed, and it also supports foot splashes. We're seeing more and more kits allow you to do foot splashes, so good on Simmons. There is a dedicated app for this kit, just like we saw with the Titan 50 BEX. You connect via Bluetooth and you can select your kits, you can edit sounds, you can adjust your mix, you can add effects, or play along to your own tracks. We've also got built-in USB MIDI. Most modules do these days. You can record right into a DAW, or you can trigger virtual instruments. Bluetooth makes playing along with your favorite songs easy, and we've got 2 expansion-ready inputs so you can add extra cymbals, toms, or maybe another foot pedal, whatever you like. So here's kind of my bottom line, first impressions. I really think the Simmons Titan 75 is a very strong pick for serious beginners. It's got the best sounds in class for the price. It's great for intermediate players. The kit gives you room to grow, and I think even advanced drummers could keep this around as a quiet practice setup. But let me know what you guys think down below in the comments, and if you're on the fence about an electronic drum set, watch this video right here on 13 things that I wish I knew before buying an electronic drum set. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video.
YouTube thinks you'll like this video next. Let me know if they're right.